Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel and this latest deck tech. Now, national season is fast approaching. It is less than a week away from the first lot of nationals, including US nationals and the calling happening in Las Vegas, as well of course as my nationals, which I'm very much looking forward to here in Australia. And this meta is shaping up to be super interesting. The Dusk meta has seen, well, I'd say a lot of decks winning. It's seen a few decks winning, but a lot of decks putting up results through top 8s, through callings, battle hardens, PTI events, and other events all around the world. Now, Icelander is kind of, goal in the spotlight a little bit, winning a lot of the major events in the lead up to this national season since Dusk released. But a lot of other heroes around that have put up results. Dromai, Bravo, of course, and as well as Lexi, still in there, putting up results as well. So the meta looks, pretty interesting with these top 4 decks, but there's a lot of decks in that maybe tier 1.5, tier 2 area as well. It looks super interesting for this national season, and I really wouldn't be surprised to see some of these decks go ahead and snap up nationals wins around the world. There's over 40 nationals happening around the world. I don't think it's going to be all Lexi, Dromai, Icelander, and Bravo. I think we're going to see some other decks win. And one of the other decks that aren't those 4 that I've been particularly interested in is Prisoner Awakener of Sol, one of the newest heroes that's come around with Dusk Till Dawn. Now, I spent a bit of time playing this. It's been kind of the fun deck that I've been playing on the side. I wanted to see how good it was. We played, of course, on Arsenal Pass, a video that you can go and check out where Nick actually played a Prism deck into me on Lexi, and that's when I was super surprised by Prism as a hero. I wasn't expecting much. The game is super close. It's a great game. You should go check it out. I won't spoil the result, but it is an awesome game. And that gave me some incentive to want to mess around with Prism. So I have been playing around a little bit with Prism. I'm not going to be playing Prism at my nationals as much as maybe, I think that would have been super fun. I just don't think it's quite good enough. I'll explain that as I get into the video. But I do think Prism is a lot better than people have been giving it credit for. And I think there's a reason that this hero starts at 32 life. I mean, there's a very good reason this hero starts at 32 life, because it is very powerful, and this hero ability is nothing to laugh at. So I wanted to present this deck tech, bring my sort of take on Prism that I've been kind of messing around with, post the gameplay video that we put out, and sort of the games that I've been able to play. Only been able to focus on a couple of matchups, but I'll talk about those, sort of, how I'm playing into those matchups, which cards I think are important, as well as go through the full deck. Of course, now, if you're a fan of what we're doing here at Arsenal Pass, you like the podcast, you like the videos we put out, the deck techs that we do with ourselves, but also with other, prominent players, bringing their decks to the forefront and sharing the information with you, then go ahead, drop a like on this video and sub to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel if you aren't already. And if you're looking for any guides, sideboard guides, there will also be a sideboard guide for key matchups and sort of tips and tricks for this Prism Awakener of Sol deck. You can go and check that out on our Patreon. We put all the deck techs up on there, plus additional monthly podcasts and some other content that we throw up there from time to time, like draft walkthroughs or kind of things like that. So you can go check that out. That's patreon.com/Arsenal Pass. With that said, let's get into it and look at this Prism deck list. I want to kick off with the game plan when it comes to this Prism build, and I think the best way to do that is let's first take a look at the equipment and weapon suite that we have. I say weapon suite because there's a couple of weapons that we're playing with this list that will sort of talk, I guess, to exactly what the game plans are with this Prism Awakener of Sol deck. So you can see we're running a full array of 10 equipment and weapons with this list. So it feels quite heavy. It feels like a lot of equipment/weapons. There's a good reason for it, and there's a couple of plans that kind of deviate depending on the matchups that you're going to play into from this. Now, this is primarily an aura-based deck, but there is, of course, still heralds in it. The Prism Awakener of Sol hero ability is really powerful, and you do need the heralds to activate that. Plus, the on rate of heralds in particular matchups is still really, really good, even without Luminaris. So you can see here we're playing Iris of Reality, and we've also got this Reality Refractor. Now, the Reality Refractor, I've got to give a big shout out to Nick Butcher, because when we played this gameplay on Arsenal Pass, again, go check out the video, watch the game, you get to see kind of how this plays into the Lexi matchup, because this list is still similar. It's a similar base to what Nick put together. Reality Refractor really impressed me, and I was surprised just how powerful this weapon is because of the ability to pay 2 resources and just come in with 5. That number 5 is actually really, really important. You look at something like Iris and the 4, yes, it's repeatable, but it does cost 1 extra. And, you're not necessarily wanting to go again into a lot of these kind of aggressive matchups. You don't have the ability to hold 2 blue cards and come in with a double Iris of Reality turn. And even if you do, that's 8 damage off your 2 cards after you've developed a board. Flip side of that, Reality Reflector lets you keep 1 card and come in for 5. And you can keep yellows, you don't just have to keep these blues. So it can be a little more flexible, and over the course of the game is going to get you more value. So I really do like Reality Reflector. I think it's been underplayed in the Prism list I've seen so far, and I particularly like this card for these aggressive matchups, the matchups where you're trying to trade damage and trying to grind out the game with this Prism list. On the flip side of that, Iris of Reality is really for these like aura-centric matchups where they're going to have poppers. You're not going to be able to push through damage with heralds and sort of like nickel and dime trade here and there. It's going to be all about setting up for these board states and overwhelming them, and then finishing them off these big sort of just like Iris beatdown game plans, getting lots of value out of your auras. So, all right, outside of the weapons, let's look at the 8 other equipment that we have. And I want to start with Empyrean Rapture, because this piece of equipment is super important to what you're going to be doing in these more aggressive matchups. The matchups where you're going to be blocking a lot more, where they're playing aggressively, and you're trying to grind out the game with just like small trades here and there, like nickeling and diming damage in, and getting lots of value out of your Figments, Flash Angels, and Empyrean Rapture is super important to this. You're going to get a couple of cards worth of value effectively just from this equipment in of itself. So basically, you're going to be, maybe defending with 2 cards, and you're going to come back with a Herald during your turn, and eventually, either they have to 2-card block plus equipment often, or 3-card block, or eventually going to start to leak a little bit of damage. They're going to take a Herald hit. You're going to put that into your soul. They're going to trigger, your hero ability. You're going to go and find that Figment, and then you're going to put it into play. And you can even transform it immediately if you want to with this Empyrean Rapture ability, which a lot of the time you are, because effectively what that's going to do is just give you more life. The way I look at it with Empyrean Rapture, with Prism, and with the Heralds and Figments plan is as soon as you get 2 Figments out and turn them into Angels, you're effectively back at that 40 starting life. Now, it sounds a little bit rudimentary and a little bit basic, and it's not necessarily always true. Sometimes you won't be transforming them immediately. Sometimes you want to get more value from them. But if you just look at this straight up, ward for the extra 8 life that you could potentially get, all things, going well. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get 2 damage worth of value out of it, maybe 3. Ideally, you're going to get 4 or 3, though. You are nearly back at that 40 starting health and playing on an even playing field with a lot of other heroes in this format. So Empyrean Rapture is going to let you use that hero ability for free. You can just go in, 2-card hands and basically gain 4 life as well. The way it honestly pans out, the way it feels like it a lot of the time, is like you're playing a 2-card hand that, let's say, something like a Hero of Protection, which is worth 7 or 8. Then you're getting this Figment, which is worth 4. It's like a 2-card 11. Like, it really does feel massive. Plus, you get the ability off of the Figment, whether that's relevant for that turn or not. So that's the Empyrean Rapture. Tunic, on the other hand, our other chess piece, this is going to be for our Iris game plan. Most of the time, we're playing these kind of really aura-centric game plans, not Figment or Herald or defensive-centric game plans, and this Herald-centric game plan, so that we can 1-card play cards like Genesis, or 1-card play cards like Ode or Parable, for instance, off of the Tunic plus a blue. Halo of Illumination, probably with Empyrean Rapture in certain matchups, this is tied with one of those important cards. This is actually going to allow you on turn 0 or turn 1 to just immediately Halo, go and get a Figment out straight away with your Empyrean Rapture ability, or not, and set up your board state immediately, so you can then start to get a bit of a board if you're on a kind of board presence game plan, or gain that kind of ward 4 if you're on a more defensive strategy. So Halo of Illumination is really important. And then we look at some things from the arms standpoint. We play Wave of Reality. This is just kind of the standard into every matchup where you don't want Null Rune Gloves, so anything that's not Rune Blade or Wizard, effectively, you're just going to play these Wave of Reality. Just allows you to stop awkward breakpoints into aggressive decks, so it just does a lot of work there. Phantasmal Footsteps, this is going to help you present a couple of Heralds in some matchups. It's going to help you utilize your hand a lot more. And then also in grindier matchups, aggressive matchups, it's just going to be able to get the value when you're playing things out like Auras with it, and you, like, there's a one-off Oasis in here. Just use your resources efficiently with the boots. And then we have Null Rune access with Silence Stilettos to go with that Null Rune Gloves and the Crown Reflection, which is in here for the Null Rune effectively into our Wizard matchup, so we can have AB3. That's the equipment and weapon suite. Let's move on now to the deck itself, the 70 cards that we have access to shuffle up in any given matchup. And I kind of see this breaking down into a few different parcels, basically, or, kind of suites, if you want to call it, within the 70 cards itself. The defensive suite, it kind of goes in there. I plug and play some of these. There's a Hero package, and you've got this kind of Figment package, then you've got the Aura package itself. And then we'll also take a look at the blues and kind of how those play in and how you want to utilize those blues. Some of those are across multiple of those packages, actually. So let's go ahead first, and let's kind of talk about the core of the deck, which is, I guess, the auras. This is an aura-based Prism deck. At the end of the day, it's going to use Figments. You'll see that there's 4 Figments in total. Plus also we have this access to the Soraya, 4 Figments in total. But the main kind of game plan really is still built around auras. And the reason for that is that Iris is really powerful and Spectra is really powerful. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start with this. It's where I was getting the best results. And then we kind of just adjust and amend the game plan based around that. And the Figments, of course, just get the most out of our hero ability. We still want to make sure we do that. So let's talk about the auras that we play. From a yellow standpoint, we have the Arclight Sentinels, Ode to Wraths, the Parable of Humility, and the Genesis. So these are our traditional auras. We've seen these from Prism decks from years and years, and Awakener of Sol is no exception, utilizing these as well. Now, a lot of the time, especially in these grindier, those blockout matchups, the Reflector matchups, we're not going to be playing Genesis. That is really for truly when we can get the value for it. start to accumulate spectral shields. You poke Soraya off of that. Those kind of go hand in hand. I don't want to play Soraya without Genesis because we do need to target the spectral shield to turn Soraya in. You can Wave of Reality and then Soraya at some point, but it's so hard to keep that Wave of Reality around in a lot of matchups just for Soraya at some point. It's just going to mean that you're blocking awkwardly, and honestly, a lot of the time, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. So Genesis, yes, for some matchups, and goes kind of hand in hand with Soraya. And then we have Arclight Sentinel, just one of the most oppressive cards. And if you've ever been done dirty by an Arclight Sentinel on, a really key turn as you're about to present lethal, or, the turn before you die, you know exactly how frustrating Arclight Sentinel can be. And it is so powerful in this deck still. We have access to a lot of blues. It is super easy to cast. Otarath, that's going to help us get that go again. We don't have Luminaris, so Otarath is our ability, or gives us the ability to go again on our heralds, which we don't otherwise have without Luminaris. So really important, and also just with that aura chip plan, since double damage basically effectively when these auras are, or 1+ damage, sorry, not a Luminaris deck anymore, when these auras are coming in, so threatening a bit more damage. And then Parable of Humility is just an MVP against, decks with a lot of poppers at 6, decks that are looking to attack from, these kind of grindy aggro matchups that we just talked about before. Those are the auras that yellow we have access to. And then we play Haze Bending, Passing Mirage, Pierce Reality, and 1 Shimmers of Silver. Now, Shimmers is a card that I've gone on and off as I've played through this deck a little bit. Had 0 Shimmers, had 3. Eventually, I've landed at 1. I think this could really depend. I want to test this a little bit more and work out how many Shimmers I actually want. I just found this card a little bit awkward, especially with the Reflector plan. It's not been as powerful as I would like it to be. And in a lot of matchups, it's so hard to stack these blue auras and get value out of the Shimmers. So instead, we focus on what I think are the most powerful ones and kind of the plan that we're looking for: Haze Bending, Passing, and the Pierce. The Haze Bending is going to get you value when they're cracking auras in your aura-centric game plans. And then the Passing Mirage is going to be great to pair with your Heralds to make sure you can get those Heralds through or force them to kill Passing Mirage. And then Pierce Reality is just extra damage value. And we have a lot of Heralds in this deck, especially, blue as well. So this just gives us extra value on the back of that. That's the aura package. Let's also now take a look at the defensive package. This is going to be the one that you're playing majority of these cards in the grindy matchups, or the aggressive matchups you play into, things like Lexi, Briar, Ninjas, for example, which can be really tough matchups. So we've got access to 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Sink Below, 3 Flicker Trick, an Oasis, and then the 3 Soul Shields as well. That kind of formulates the defensive package, and I kind of put Warmonger's Diplomacy in there, kind of adjacent as well, because it is an important card for decks like Viserai, even disrupting something like Briar, Lexi. If they're not on Trench, then your job's already half done just by having the Warmongers around. So that's kind of the defensive package. Now, Flicker Trick is a really powerful card, but you have to understand if the deck that you're playing into can manipulate and break that Flicker Trick. And sometimes you're not going to play it because of that, and sometimes you're going to play it but be aware of it, or play only some of them. So a good example of this is like Katsu with Ancestrals and Ancestral Empowerments, with the Breaking Scales also, and with Art of War. Basically blocking something like a red Surging Strike with Flicker Trick is just a no-go, because you just have this, unless you've seen all their Art of Wars and all their Ancestral Empowerments. Of course, Breaking Scales won't work on the Surging Strike, but you could just be putting yourself into a position where you get completely blown out in an already tough matchup. So Flicker Trick there, for instance, no good. Against Briar even, sometimes it can be a bit awkward, especially if you think they're playing Lightning Presses, but it's just a dead card on Channel Mount Heroic turns, for instance. So I like to cut some in that matchup, but against something like Lexi, it can be an absolute MVP, and is one of the key sort of cards for that matchup, and I'll talk about matchups in a minute, that you're going to want to need for that matchup. So yeah, and then the one-off Oasis looks a bit odd. I think you could play more Oasis. This has kind of been, I was talking about the Shimmers before, and then we also have these Miraging Metamorphs, which I'll talk about. These have been sort of the cards I've been playing around with, and Oasis has come down to 1. I don't think you need particularly much help against Icelander or the Wizards in general. I think you have quite a powerful game plan, but Oasis does help there, of course. And also it's quite nice with the boots, with your Phantasmal Footsteps, to utilize your resources to basically better use. Get the most out of your resources when you are playing defensively into decks. So I have been playing as many as 3 Oasis, and then pitching a blue or a yellow Oasis, Phantasmal Footsteps. But this deck isn't like the sort of the Prism decks of old. So I think Oasis maybe isn't quite as impactful, and Phantasmal Footsteps also isn't quite as impactful as the decks of old. But for instance, if you've got a blue and a yellow in hand, and you're going to play an aura on the end of turn or at some point during your opponent's turn, 1 resource left over, you can Oasis or you can Boots, or 2 blues, 2 resources left over, Oasis and Boots, for instance. So I do like having access to some amount of Oases in the deck. Got to talk about Heralds and Figments in conjunction, I think, because they are just so important, and the deck doesn't work without one or the other. So let's start with these Heralds. The red heralds that we play are Herald of Protection, Herald of Tenacity, Herald of Triumph, and War Tune Herald, so access to 12 red heralds. And then we also have access to these blue heralds as well, which is 13 heralds. Looks like 12 blue heralds. One before. So 12 blue heralds. Now, heralds are great, obviously, into matchups where they're not going to have the poppers and you are able to trade like 2-card above rate. So everyone talks about, these 2-card Wounded Bulls, the 2-card Fiendel's Fighting Spirit, but, a 2-card Herald of Protection, which is effectively worth, 8 or 9, or, in fact, with going getting a Figment and Imperium Rapture on the board, can be worth like 12. So these red heralds do a lot of work in particular matchups. Some other matchups, they're just going to be blocking for 3. These things like Bravo, for instance. But in other matchups, they are going to do a lot of work. And they are going to go and get you what is the other half of the deck, which is these Figments. I want to talk a little bit quickly about some of the heralds. So Protection, kind of a bit of a no-brainer. War Tune Herald, just such a powerful card. You can play it off 2-card red hands, for instance. Herald of Tenacity is an interesting one. Now, Herald of Tenacity is one that I think is quite good from a dominate standpoint. It just means that against decks that don't have poppers, who might be trying to hold you off this kind of ability to go and get Figments early, Herald of Tenacity just pushes through that damage. Now, the reason going and getting Figments early is good is because it means you won't draw them. Drawing Figments sucks. They don't block. They only pitch for 2. They're a crack ball right in your hand if you're not going to play them. And you don't want to be playing them from your hand. You want to search them with your hero ability. So Herald of Tenacity helps you go and get Figment early. Just getting one out of your deck. If you ever draw 2 in your hand, it is awful. At least with 1 you can pitch, but when you draw 2, it is not great. So the kind of Figment of Tenacity is as a sideboard, and then the other 3 Figments I pretty much play main deck, but I do like having access to 4. And so if you can get it down to 2 in a lot of matchups, then it just feels a lot better. You're gonna basically never draw 2 in a hand, and you're gonna see them a lot less often, and then you can eventually go and get them. And Herald of Tenacity just helps that. Herald of Triumph, just great against poppers, and is just a nice popper that again can help you try and like force through this this hero ability early. Unless they want to commit 2-3 cards or 2+ equipment, which a lot of the time you're gonna be happy with. You can just come in with another hero next turn and take minimal damage for it. Figments, I talked about Tenacity being a sideboard card. I think it's the weakest of these. It's really hard to kind of get value out of that dominate ability. We don't play Herald of Erudition, for instance. So you kind of dominate. Something, of course, on like a Herald of Protection is great, but it's quite hard to get this off, and it costs you quite a lot. But getting dominate is hard, but if you can get quite a reward out of it. But just having access to another ward card can often be quite good, but does cost you a card from Sol, which is quite expensive in this deck. You don't want to be losing too many cards from Sol, especially early on. Figment of Protection, one of the best, is going to go and get you those Spectral Shields, which helps you with things like Soraya as well. So often you're kind of setting up the Aegis, Archangel of Protection, to line up with a Soraya turn potentially to do these kind of big snowballs. Not happening all the time, it's quite hard to do, but of course the Figment itself does make a Spectral Shield, which is great, can be used for Soraya, and then also the attack itself can get you 2 more. So and how that works. Figment of Erudition, I think Ponder Token is pretty good, although Ponder Token is not fantastic in this deck because there's a lot of blues, and some of these blues you just don't want to be arsenaling, particularly things like Warmongers, Blue Herald. There is 13 Heralds in this. I just realized there is the Blue Herald of Rebirth as well, so let's not forget that. So some of these cards aren't the best to arsenal. You never want to arsenal a Figment, really. That's just bad. As I say, you want to get them out of your deck. So the Ponder Token is not amazing. Then in terms of Soraya, Archangel of Erudition, the flip side, the Light Angel ally that flips from this Figment, it's pretty good. A lot of these, honestly, the way I'm looking at this is to do with the Ward 4. But these are just like these sticky weapons that, in grindier matchups are still really good. And drawing 2 cards is going to give you an option of Arsenal card in a lot of matchups if you do get this off. So I do like it. A lot of the time you're just going to attack for vanilla damage with these angels, though, that flip from Figments. All right. I can quickly talk about Triumph. There's some really cool stuff you can do with Triumph. Again, go and check out that game on Arsenal Pass that we play. Nick on Prism, me on Lexi. You can see a really cool interaction with Figment of Triumph. I don't want to ruin it, but if you want to go and check out a little bit of a tip and trick there, you can see that. And then Victoria, Archangel of Triumph. This is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, for basically these more aggressive matchups where you're going to go and get Figments just because of what this hero ability can do. What this Angel's ability can do when it comes to nerfing your opponent's attacks and just reducing damage out of them. All right, before I cut into matchups, the only other card I haven't talked about so far is Miraging Metamorph. Miraging Metamorph is just a powerful return rate, 1 for 7, and also in matchups where they're going to be popping your stuff and you're playing on an Aura's plan, this is an MVP. They pop it, you're going to be getting another Aura, copy of your Aura, and if they don't, then they have to throw cards at it to not take damage, or they just take damage. So Miraging Metamorph is great, and then in other matchups, it just blocks 3 or just threatens 7 damage. It can be especially powerful in the late game. So really like Miraging Metamorph. I don't think I want 3, but I have flicked between 0 to 3. Same with Oasis as I talked about before. All right, briefly just want to cover a couple of matchups when it comes to this Prism deck. And I'm going to start with Dromai. I'm just going to put it out there. Start with Dromai. Dromai is the reason that I don't want to play Prism at Nationals. And to be honest, the reason it hasn't been a consideration for me. I think if Dromai is good in a meta, then I just don't think right now, at least with the builds that I've been working on, the builds I've seen, there is a good reason to play Prism. I think, unfortunately, with the current meta, Dromai just seems like the superior illusionist. And also, you have a terrible matchup into Dromai. I honestly am not really sure the best way to win this matchup with this particular list. I think you can tweak your list, and I've seen some lists out there of people going after this matchup, trying to work out how they can beat it. I've seen people trying to fatigue it. I've seen people going to like a hybrid strategy with new Luminaris and Heralds and just try and beat down and sort of outvalue them. I've seen people try and do a bit of a hybrid of both in the same game, so they have some Heralds and some Auras. This deck is going to do that game plan basically if you are going to be able to beat them. One of the best ways to beat them is just hope they don't draw a Rake early. If they don't draw a Rake early, then you can actually get a lot of damage down the board. You can actually get some of your own Auras. Haze Bending can be like a lot of value, and you soak up damage. And then you have kind of the, your Spectral Shields on the board to just keep attacking with and clear dragons if you need to. But it is a really difficult matchup, will not lie. Next up, let's talk about Lexi, one of the most prevalent decks in the meta right now, and arguably still the best deck in the meta. The game plan for this list is basically to almost fatigue Lexi. I'm not saying you just straight up just block everything and fatigue it in that way, but you are basically doing a lot of defensive work, a lot of using your Figments for the Ward 4, a lot of all these defensive cards you have to block out their key threats, run them out of their Endless Arrows, run them out of their kind of repeatable, their 3-of-a-kind Rain Razors turns, and then you can start to stick some stuff on the board. Use Reality Reflector to punch in, just whenever you get the opportunity, and eventually you're basically just going to fatigue them by damage. Essentially, they're either going to get to a point in the end game where you've kind of ground them down to pretty close life totals. You're going to start to get a little bit of a life lead back, and then you're going to just punch them with this reality refractor with one of your auras. It's actually pretty easy to stick an aura down because they can't continue to clear this, and if they do, that means that they're going to fatigue by just throwing arrows at it. So basically, it's not this traditional like block fatigue, but you are kind of fatiguing by damage by presenting threats, blocking good damage, and then getting to an in-game where they kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't when it comes to clearing auras. You're just going to keep creating more and then just killing them with Refractor plus some Heralds in the in-game. Kind of what Lexi looks like. Talk a little bit about Icelander. I think this is a great matchup for Prism when it comes to Icelander. I think, just being on an aura plan, having AB3, having really high access to blues, and there is this kind of like, I guess there is this, ability to just kind of shut them down by getting auras on the board early. Then as well, you have these angels to like show, I guess, a Ward 4 aspect as well. So they can kind of give you insurance, basically. It's like having like a little bit of a sand cover face up on the board in the late game with the Ward 4. So you can make sure that you don't get sort of Storm Striders out in the in-game if it does get a little bit close. But yeah, it is a really difficult matchup for them, and your auras can just kind of take over. You do have to be conservative. You don't want to be trying to like just throw everything at the board and then leaking damage, because then they can get into a point where they can just trade damage on like end-to-end turns with their blues and Waning Moon. But you can just slowly take over that matchup, and it's a pretty good one, I think. Talk about Bravo. Obviously, Bravo has had a bit of resurgence post Ultim's Living Legend, and Bravo, again, another matchup that I think is good. The reason that I think Prism was even a consideration for me for Nationals, and why I think people are sleeping on Prism a little bit, is because I think it has a good Icelander matchup, a good Bravo matchup, and a pretty good Lexi matchup as well. Not a good Dromai matchup, and honestly, your matchup into Ninjas and Rune Blades can be a little bit tough as well. In fact, into Ninja, it's really tough, and Rune Blade is not great. It's not favorable, I would say. But, if 3 of the decks that you're expecting to show up, or 3 of the biggest 4 that you're expecting to show up in Bravo, Icelander, and Lexi, then I think Prism is a good choice. So, Bravo matchup, again, it's an aura-based plan. You're getting on the Iris, and you're just trying to sort of swing them down and just take over the game with your auras. You've got that great defensive package to make sure you can get through dominate turns and keep your life total high, and force them to start. Once they start having to kill auras, you're kind of just away laughing. Arclight Sentinel does a ton of work in that matchup, of course. And then lastly, we'll talk about just the ninjas quickly. I think the way that if you're going to beat ninjas with Kodachis especially, they're going to be able to take out your auras and kind of do it at the end of chains pretty efficiently. It's always been tough for Prism and even old Prism. But I think if you're going to win the matchup, the key is really to get down kind of a couple of auras early if you can, get value out of them, and then just hit with Heralds to leak damage down. Try and win that way, and again, use Reality Refractor as effectively as you can to trade damage in the in-game and put them in a tough situation towards the end of that game. All right, that is going to do it for this deck tech here on Arsenal Pass. Prism, Awakener of Sol, I think I think it's been slept on. I think Prism is really good. Is it a tier 1 deck? No, I don't think so, but I do think it is viable, and I hope maybe a list like this can give you some inspiration. I'm not saying this list is perfect by any means. This is the kind of list that I've been playing some games with and playing in between testing the deck that I'm actually going to play for Nationals, but I have really, really enjoyed it, and I know a lot of people out there are Prism enjoyers. So if you like what we do here at Arsenal Pass, you've been enjoying the deck techs, you've been enjoying the interviews, the podcast, all the things we put out there, then make sure you go ahead, drop us a like on the video and a sub to the channel. Maybe even leave a comment. What do you think of Prism in this meta? Do you think it's better than even I think it is? Do you think I'm, stuck in the copium and it's not that good at all? Maybe, how wrong am I? What has your sort of been experience with Prism so far? As I say, I'm excited by Prism being a lot better than I thought. I had it as the weakest hero with the upgrades from Dusk to Dawn, and I've been pleasantly proven wrong, I think. At least that's how I feel so far. So yeah, go drop us a comment, like, sub to the channel. And if you're looking for a deck guide for this or a sideboard guide for the key matchups for this Prism deck, you can find that over on patreon.com/ArsenalPass, where we put up all of our deck guides, as well as our additional monthly podcast and some other content up there as well. But again, big thank you for everyone for checking this video out, and to all those people playing in Nationals, best of luck.